And we are back with our good guest, our fun guest, Anita Hashem, who's telling us all of the glorious things that God has done in her life. But I'm ready to hear about From Booze to Bibles.
Yes. Well,
Come forward to the mic, Anita.
okay, here I go again. Yes, God laid on our heart after my husband. Well, the minute he got saved, we went home, and he went to the store, the supermarket, and began to unload all the liquor off of the liquor shelves, you know. I didn't tell the part, but when he brought that offer to buy this store in addition to our other one, I refused it, and I said, I won't do it because you're selling liquor. In this one, it has a liquor department. I won't put God in the liquor business. Well, God then, a day later, said, why aren't you signing those papers? And I said, because, Lord, I don't want to put you in the liquor business. He said, I want that store, and I'm going to break your husband. And he did. He took away our other store. We had to sell it to keep us going. This other one was so bad, the one with the liquor.
One was so good and the other was so bad.
Yeah. We had to sell it. We lost everything we had. And facing bankruptcy when Vince came in. And I've told the story of how he came in. But after he got saved that night, we went down and we started loading boxes out off the shelves. And by the next day, he had all the help. And they had moved every bottle of liquor out of that supermarket and put in a storeroom. And Vince made his own ad, and he told me to come in and look at his ad for that week, and it was headlined. It said, Vincent goes from booze to Bibles. Yeah, and that was his idea. That was his inspiration from God. Well, I knew he had to go, but I never dreamed of booze to Bibles. And so then I had to pray and see how I opened a Bible bookstore. I'd never run one. But God told me to sent me a man from Oregon to help me. And he was the perfect person. He put us in, you know, so we had a Bible bookstore. And there was so many people through the next 7 years that were saved. And
now, where on the timeline is this? What year was this?
You know, it was in the 70s. Probably my son would know better than I.
And you had a prayer room above the
yes,
Bibles.
and he built me a prayer room because there were so many people coming for prayer. And I was ministering in the coffee shop and every place. And he said, we can't have this. He said, we got to get you a room. So we had people come from all over. I know one time a man came, he was a deacon, head deacon from some large church in Fresno. And he was telling my husband, he said, this Pentecostal, this tongues thing, he said, I don't believe in it, and now it's rampant in my church. And he said, I'm having a church meeting tonight, I'm putting a stop to it. And he said, I understand your wife prays for people. And he said, would she pray for me? Well, my husband came and told me. And I said, I can't pray for him. I speak in tongues myself, you know. And he just looked at me and he said, I'll meet you upstairs in 2 minutes, you know, and walked out. So I went upstairs and there was this man, very nice man. And he began to tell me his woeful story, you know. And but the day before this, I'd been in a monastery. God had sent us up to a meeting in a monastery, and the prophet that was there laid hands on me, and he said, God has given you a double portion of his spirit. And I wondered, well, why, you know, but so I didn't know. Well, anyway, so I said, well, let me pray for you. And I raised my hand to pray for this man, and God slayed him in the spirit. He just went down like a ton of bricks laying there on that floor for about 20 minutes. And my husband, it scared him to death, and he said, do I need to call a doctor? And I said, no, it's the Lord speaking to this man. He got up off of that floor when God got through talking, had the biggest smile on his face, and his face just was filled with the glory of God. And he smiled at me, and he said, everything's okay. And he walked out and went home, and he never said anything more about it. You know, I don't know what happened, but he was at peace with the tongue speakers, I should say.
One of Bakersfield's most prominent, prestigious pastors, and I'll name him John Lavender,
yes,
known to many, was adamantly opposed to what this woman was doing. And tell her what happened to John.
Oh, yes. John went to my husband, and God had me open meetings at the YWCA. And I didn't know what he was doing, but he began to have me pray for people, and there was miracles, and people began to get the baptism. The Holy Spirit began to speak in tongues. And then we held a banquet room and had speakers come in. Well, anyway, God did a marvelous work. Well, John Lavender heard about it, and I ended up, I didn't know who these people were that were coming. I didn't invite anybody. And God filled that room, prayer room, with people. And I would say there was up to 70 or 80 people. I don't know how many. I really didn't ever count them. But anyway, they were mostly, I didn't know it, but John Lavender's people. And a lot of the women that became my closest friends were deaconesses and things in his church. So he went to see my husband. He said, "You've got to stop your wife." And my husband said, "What's she doing?" And he said, "Well," he said, "she's down there at that YWCA," and he said, "she's winning all of my people to the to speaking in tongues." And he said, "I can't have that." And my husband said, "Look," he said, "God told her to do it. Forget it." He said, "She's going to do it. There's no way stopping her. He said, I can't stop her." And so he really disliked me, you know. Well, one day, a couple of months later, I get a phone call from Dr. Pewter, Glenn Pewter. And he said, "Anita, I'm bringing someone to you tonight." And he said, "I can't tell you who it is." And he said, "But be prepared about 9 o'clock after church." He said, "I'm bringing this, couple." So anyway, I wondered all day and I prayed. So I didn't even go to church myself on that Sunday. God told me to pray, not to go to church. So I did, and at nighttime, about 9 o'clock, when they closed their church services, they came. And I opened the door, and there was John Lavender and his wife, and Glenn Pewter and his wife. And so they came in, and he said, "I brought my wife for prayer." And so I went and got a chair from the dining room, put it in the middle of the living room, was going to pray for her. And God said, "Don't touch her." He said, "She's frightened." He said, "She's scared to death." And he said, "But I didn't bring her here to be prayed for. I brought John Lavender here to be prayed for." And so I told John, I said, "John, I can't touch your wife. But God didn't bring her here to be prayed for. You came to be prayed for." And I took him, he was dragging those feet from his chair to that chair in the middle of the living room. And he sat down, and the power of God fell. I tell you, there was tongues and everything. After that, he spoke in tongues, and he began to he brought in then, speakers that believed in tongues after that, and he was a changed man.
That was about the time, Bob, that I arrived here in Bakersfield from Oregon to take my job in television, and the first place I went to was that John Lavender's church in the wake of his experience. And I'm telling you, that church was just exploding with electricity. And I said, "This doesn't feel like going to church. This feels like standing on the edge of a volcano that's getting ready to erupt." You could just feel the power in that church.
God does such awesome things. When you just give him an inch of your life, he'll take it over and make something worthwhile out of it.
That's really good. That is really good.
Well, Anita, what we want to do now is take you into your latter years, your husband in his passing, and suddenly God opens up a whole new realm, a whole new door for you.
Yes.
Take us into that part of your life and where you are now.
Yeah. Before my husband died, he would give me prophecy, and he told me, he said, "I'm taking your husband home." And he outlined, he said, "I'm going to begin to train you. You're going to go into a new work." And he gave it just, the prophecies were in detail. And my family will tell you that they came to pass just exactly like God said. Well, I didn't know what it was either. And so God told me, he said, "Now next Tuesday," this was on a Thursday, the week before, "you're to start a prayer meeting." I had nobody to ask because we'd moved to Pismo. In the interim, we had retired, and I was out of the loop. And I said, "Well, Lord, I have no one but my own children to invite." And he said, "Okay, next week, Tuesday, you start a prayer meeting."
And we're going to hear the results of that. again, we want to, if you can't stay with us, we want you to know how to reach Anita. It's Anita Hashem at AnitaJoyHashem@hotmail.com or at her website at manafromonhigh.com. And when we come back, we're going to continue to follow this amazing life journey of Anita Joy Hashem and the new door that God has opened for her and that she's continuing to walk in. So we'll be right back.
Yes.